This next film is of DempseyCalhoun, who was a sculptor back in the 70s, who was from Bynum, which was an area outside of Chapel Hill where the Farm Store movie was shot. But he was living, I think, in Greenville at the time, and we went down there to shoot for University Television, which was the PBS station in that part of North Carolina in those days. And that producer was Bill Hanna, who hired me on a number of these projects, and great guy. And Dempsey is still going strong these days. You can Google him, DempseyCalhoun, and he's still working down there and making beautiful things. So he picked right. He has been sculpting, making these pieces for 40 years plus. The little music with it is Fun by the Modern Jazz Quartet at the Music Inn with the wonderful Jimmy Giuffre. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
What kind of artist would come from the home of a Baptist minister who raised his family on tobacco farms, where the only available museums were full of trees, birds, and forest floor? His name is DempseyCalhoun, and he is a North Carolina wood sculptor and coppersmith.
I consider myself a farm boy, and of course I started my feeling for doing things with my hands started on the farm. The first thing I can remember doing was I used to get broomstick hounds and tobacco sticks, and I carve fishing lures, fishing baits out of them. You know, I'd take a pocket knife and whittle them, and then paint them with magic markers, and we'd buy these little treble hooks, and we'd spend a lot of rainy days out in the garage or something carving and making these baits and painting stripes on them and screwing these hooks in them. And then when I was about 4 or 5, I saw this movie with Howard Hill. He was an archer. And it really made an impression on me, and from that day on the farm, I would make bows and arrows continually. I made hundreds of them. I'd cut saplings down and stretch them and dry them. I don't know what I used for bowstrings, I can't remember, but I know I would get chicken feathers and reeds out of the swamp, and I would glue the feathers on the ends and put glue nails in the end of the reeds, and I got quite skilled at archery, just shooting on the farm. But those two things were the very beginning of my craft output, so to speak.
Calhoun's parents seem to have given him an appreciation of structure in life, in particular, the family structure. But they left him free to develop and enjoy his creative skills in his own way. So, when it came time to go to college, he selected a career which would satisfy him, but also one which would give him financial security.
Well, I was going to be a commercial artist. Somewhere I'd read that commercial artists do very well. If you design a cover of a magazine, you get X number of dollars and all this kind of stuff. But I never did take a course in commercial art. The first courses I got were in sculpture. And I found that I developed such a feeling for sculpture and three-dimensional things that my thoughts of commercial art completely flew out the window. I found something I really enjoyed. You know, I got busy in sculpture. And I spent hours and hours and hours above and beyond the normal classroom time. Sometimes you'd work all night long just for the sheer joy of doing it. Of course, I was caught up in the romanticism of it at that time. I was going to be the struggling young artist, the sculptor who makes it, who comes from nothing, you know, and later he's, you know, world known. So I entertained these thoughts for a year or so, and in my shows and exhibitions that I got into. And later, after I got married and got some responsibility, this started getting played down a little bit. You know, then it became living, making a living, supporting your family. Until finally, at this point now, I find that I'm not interested in fame or wealth at all. To me, it's like carpentry or farming or a dentist or whatever. It's a living. And beyond that, I draw the line.
Certainly, choices are easy for Dempsey Calhoun when an issue involves his family. But when he has to make a choice between working in wood or copper, he prefers to make none at all. In fact, he seems to relish the diversity and different freedoms the two materials offer him.
I knew how to weld. I could arc weld and gas weld, and we even melted metals and cast them at school. I worked in that. But there was a very fascinating idea to heating a piece of metal till it was red hot and then taking a hammer and shaping it. One of my teachers did that once, and it really just made me very sensitive to it, and I was very interested. And so from that time on, I kind of packed it back in my mind. And then I was just trying different materials and methods. I stumbled upon making this ladle out of copper, and I hammered it and sawed it and then forged a handle out using a torch. And from that first copper and bronze kitchen ladle, I made other utensils, and then other ideas hit me, and they began to sell at craft fairs and galleries and whatever. And so that was the basis of me kind of going on my own and becoming semi-full-time production. Of course, I had to work at a lot of other places to supplement it when things weren't selling. I folded underwear at Penny's and welded construction work, but that, as I said, developed completely separate, more or less, from the school, and was kind of picked up into my system of doing things. I find that I do about as much wood as metal. I get tired of working on metal. I work on it for an hour or 3 hours or 2 days or a week, and I get sick of it. So I'll walk up in the other room and I'll start, get the chisel out, and I'll start carving wood. And I'll carve and sand and file until I'm tired of that, and I'll run back in the other room and I'll work on metal a while. Sometimes I'll combine the two. But I think they work so well together because my forms are the same actually in wood and metal. It's not often you can do this. Sometimes a material will dictate that you can't do the same thing with this as you can with another material. But wood and metal, they're resistant, but they're easily enough shaped so that my forms don't have to change a great deal. The rounded edges, the curves, the organic nature of the design is generally the same. Henry Moore, he had a big influence on my work as an early sculptor because his things are so organic in nature, very sensitive to rounded corners and curves and things of this nature. Angles never did a thing for me. The way I work, I get the idea, and if it's a strong idea and a good one, I can sit down and knock the thing out, sometimes in a few hours, sometimes in a day, or certainly within the week. Whereas some people might take their time and work for months or a year. But I don't work that way, and I've been trying to force myself to take the time to do something nice and elaborate. But I found that every time I got started on one of these fantastic, elaborate pieces, I'd find that I could resolve the thing in 2 hours. I see it completed. So I think I'm going to just kind of scratch that whole idea, that, strain of trying to come up with something that's going to baffle the art world, and just do what I do.
Dempsey Calhoun does things for his own reasons, to suit his own needs, an attitude he may have learned when, as a boy in the woods, he fashioned things for his eyes alone. His sculpture reflects the limitless forms of nature, and as such, it is free and wholly modern in concept. Yet, he seems as certain of his task in life as a medieval guildsman at work on a cathedral.